welcome to the Birth Bootcamp podcast. I'm Holly Hopley, the CEO.
And I'm Megan Busk, the head of marketing.
And today we have a fun guest with us, Alexis Partridge, and we're going to hear all about her 3 births. And I'm just a little bit of that I know about it. I'm excited to talk to you about it. So will you just start with a quick introduction, like where you're from, who you are, just so our listeners know, who they're talking to?
Of course. My name is Alexis Partridge. I am from Utah, and we're in South Utah County right now in a little town called Santaquin. I've got 4 kids, and their ages are 6, 4, 4, and 1. So I've got some twins in there. But yeah, we're a happy little family out here.
That's awesome. Do you want to start off with your first baby and tell us all about how that birth went?
Yes. So my oldest his name is Chase, and when I was pregnant with him, we were married for probably 6 months. So pretty soon after we were married, I found out I was pregnant, and I was really hoping to have an unmedicated birth with him. So I read a few books, and I did not as much as I probably could have to prepare at that time, but he was born spontaneously at 37 weeks, 5 days-ish, somewhere around there.
Mm-hmm.
I labored at home for a few hours with him. It was like in the middle of the night. I actually had a coworker. I was working at the hospital at the time. She was like, "I don't think you're gonna make it to your next shift at the hospital." I'm like, no, I'm fine. It's too early." But I had a feeling throughout my pregnancy that I would have him a little bit earlier than anticipated for most first-time moms. But
yeah, that's definitely earlier.
Yeah, it was earlier. My mom had babies early, so I'm like, it'll be fine if he's born a little bit earlier. And I didn't think that I would make it to my due date anyway.
Yeah. How did you know you were in labor? Did your water break, or did you just start having contractions?
I started having contractions. And actually, another thing I forgot to mention, with each of my pregnancies, I get Braxton Hicks contractions throughout my entire pregnancy. Mm-hmm. With him, it started before 20 weeks, like 18 weeks or something like that. Wow. And so I had those consistently, but those weren't, they're not painful. They're just, you can just feel your belly tightening. And the ones I got with my labor were very different. They're very strong, and they were intense. And they were consistent. So and it was like the middle of the night, so I was asleep when I woke up to them. But I tried doing all the things I could at home, and I didn't listen to the best advice I probably could have gotten in the shower or the bath, but I was told, don't get in any water if you're having contractions. I'm like, okay, that doesn't make any sense. but I listened, and so I just tried to stay out. I was trying to do laundry and dishes in the middle of the night while my husband was sleeping, and
stay preoccupied.
Yeah, tried to distract myself. Like, well, I've got laundry I've got to get done if we're going to be leaving. I didn't even have a hospital bag packed. I just was throwing things together in between contractions. But it progressed until so that was like at 10:30, I think, around there I started feeling them. And I decided that we needed to go to the hospital and it was like 1:30 or something like that. And we were like 2 minutes from the hospital at the time. We were really close. Mm-hmm. So we decided to just pack some stuff and go. And the checking in was horrible because I'm like, I can't think. I'm trying to get this, get through these contractions here. Mm-hmm. But we got into a room, and I was at like a 3 dilated. And so they said, okay, we'll let you labor here for around an hour, and we will check again in and out and see if things are progressing. And I said, okay. And they put all the monitors on and everything, and that was agony. Dealing with the monitors and the IV and trying to go to the bathroom and have to everything. So it was hard, but after that hour, they said, okay, you're at a 4, so it looks like things are moving along. We'll keep you, and you can labor for in this room. And I feel like kind of confined a little bit because it was in the middle of the night anyway, so my husband was sleeping, so he wasn't as much of a he didn't know what to do. He was like, I don't know how to help. I'm just here. So
Mhm.
I just was by myself for most of the time. And then about 2 hours later, they decided to check me again. And I hadn't progressed at all at that time. And at this point, I kind of wish they would have just said, okay, we'll just send you home. You're 2 minutes away. If things progress, come back. But they decided to artificially break my water and to try and get things moving. And it had been like 6 hours at this point, so it wasn't super long.
Mhm.
But I continued to stay out of 4, even though they broke my water. And so about 2 hours later, they decided to add let's see, no, it wasn't 2 hours later, it was like 4 hours later, they decided to add Pitocin. And I was having regular contractions at this point. So looking back, the Pitocin didn't really seem necessary, but we just went with it. And by 10 o'clock, I just was like, I can't do it. The Pitocin contractions are too much. So I had an epidural, and then he was born about 6 hours later. So it was probably around an 18-hour birth. Pushing wasn't super long. We did some practice pushes, and about 2 hours, and then he was out within like 3 or 4 pushes. So not too long. I wish I could have seen like the placenta afterwards and all the cool things. But my husband was
Mhm.
like, it was like a waterfall when he came out because of all the water that was behind him.
Mhm.
But yeah, he had a little bit of shoulder dystocia from what I remember. It wasn't too bad. So they had the NICU team like ready just in case. And he wasn't having any good response once he was born, but he was okay. They handed him to me, and I just was crying a big mess because it was
Mhm.
my first little one, and all the hormones were just rushing. But it was overall was a good experience.
Good.
A few things I wish could have gone differently because I did want the unmedicated birth, but overall it was a good experience.
Mhm.
Good. And going on to that, like, how was your breastfeeding and postpartum experience?
It was rough.
Yeah.
I my my body felt okay. I wasn't like in a ton of pain when I remember. Um, but they did do an episiotomy, so I was a bit sensitive for a few weeks. But breastfeeding, I kind of had to beg and beg for a lactation consultant to come in to see me. It seemed like they probably were just really busy, I'm guessing, but it wasn't very helpful when they did come in. She handed me a nipple shield and said, okay, you can try this and see where it goes. And I'm like, well, this isn't really a long-term solution, but
Mm-hmm.
I wish I would have had like a lactation consultant prior to birth. There's a lot of things I could have done differently to prepare myself, and have somebody on hand to help me with breastfeeding because I have like flat or inverted nipples, and so learning how to breastfeed and do some adjustments prior to that could have been helpful for my journey. But I did mostly pumping for 6 months, and then I kind of was like, okay, this is a lot, so I quit and
Yeah, pumping's
went
a
to
lot.
formula
It
feeding.
is.
It was a lot. It's like another baby. That's what I
Yeah.
think of it
Yeah, it
as.
really is.
It's
And you
like
have
a
to be on
full-time job.
time, and yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, you time your whole life around it. I feel
Yeah.
like you have to leave the house, make sure you pump before you go. So
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
it was a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's tough.
I had
Well,
like the same experience with my first. Like they were like, "Here you go. Here's a nipple shield." I was
And you're
like,
like, oh, what am I supposed to do with
I was
this?
like, "This is not
yeah,
helpful."
exactly.
I
Yep.
know.
Yeah. Okay, let's go to your second one, your second birth. So these are your twins, right?
Yes, these are my twins. Twins are on my family, but
As I say, you
I
were
had a
probably shocked.
Yeah. Well, I had a feeling I was probably 7 weeks, and I had a random dream. I had 3 babies in little bassinets around me. And I told my mom about that. She's like, oh, that's weird. And I wasn't super sick with my first, wasn't super sick with my second pregnancy. It was just the average. And so I have a good friend who has twins, and my mom told me, like, there's no way you're having twins. Your friend she was horribly sick with her twin pregnancy, and so you're fine. So I'm like, well, I still have a feeling. And so we went to our first appointment, and I dropped my oldest off with her, and my oldest was 17 months at the time. So he was really little when we had a second pregnancy. But I told her and I dropped him off, like, if we come back sheet white, it's probably because we're having twins. And she's like, yeah, that's funny. And we went, and lo and behold, there's twins. And my husband's face was just like, it just dropped. He was like, wait, what? And the doctor was like, I wish I was a fly on the wall when I can see you guys share this news with your families, because it was, totally unexpected.
Yeah.
And I was panicking a little bit inside, because just the situation we were in wasn't ideal for two babies at once. But we had a townhome, which worked out great. It was perfectly sized. The car we had we needed to upgrade our car, so that was the only downfall. But the pregnancy itself was really smooth. I did get the Braxton Hicks contractions early on. It was probably 8 weeks at this time, 9
Oh,
weeks.
wow.
Wow.
And so I felt them really early, and I started showing a little bit earlier than usual as well. So I'm like, it could be, before I knew I was twins, I was thinking it could be either just some extra bloat or because it's second pregnancy, but I had a feeling that it was two. So, but I was right.
That's amazing. Mother's intuition. You just knew.
Right. I feel like you always know, I have a feeling. But I was 30 weeks. Let's see, 31 weeks when the Braxton Hicks got intense and consistent. And so we went to the hospital just to make sure everything was okay. And I was progressing dilation wise. And so they determined that it was preterm labor. So I was in the hospital for a week, which was really bad. It was awful being there for that long. It was like jail. But they were able to install everything. I took a medication to help with stop the contractions. And they sent me home after that week, and I was good for about 3 weeks. I was able to keep the babies in. And then at 35 weeks, right after 4th of July, they were born. But it was, I can't determine how long the labor was, just because I felt the surges pick up again, and they weren't like horribly painful, but they were still like strong. So I'm guessing that probably could have been early labor, but it was probably about an 8-hour labor, I would guess, like, of true contractions. And I remember they called it no man's land, because they couldn't really figure out what was happening with my body. But I decided to get the epidural when I was in the hospital, because I just was like, this is not real labor. This is horrible. I just need to get the epidural, because it actually picked things up. And I was at like a 7, I think, by 7 a.m. that morning. So I went into labor and delivery unit probably like 5 p.m. with the surges, and they kind of stayed consistent until about 10. And so maybe it was a bit longer, but they broke my water when I was at a 7. And then they took me into the OR, because they knew that's probably where the best place would be to have them, just in case, because I was 35 weeks. I was early for having them. Just a little bit early, wasn't too bad. But but baby A, her name is Elsie. She was born pretty quickly. So I think I got into the OR at like 7:30, 7:45, and she was born at 8:15. And baby B was breech at the time, and so my doctor wanted to just do a breech extraction, basically just grabbing her by her feet and pulling her out. And when baby A was out, she decided to flip, and so we gave her a minute to flip and get in a good position. And she was born sunny side up, so posterior. But I was able to have a vaginal birth with both of them, which I was a little bit nervous about because sometimes once baby A is out, baby B doesn't do as well, and they end up having to do a C-section. So I was very fortunate to be able to experience the vaginal birth with both of them.
Mm-hmm.
They were both perfect. They did not have any NICU time. They were healthy, and I think because I did get some steroid shots at my 31 week mark when I was in the hospital. I think that probably could have helped a little bit with their lungs to help them not be so sticky and not have issues. But overall, it was a really good birth experience. They did give me Pitocin afterwards without me knowing. And so I had very terrible contractions and cramps. And that would lasted for about a day. But other than that, we got to go home 2 days, 2 days later, and they were perfectly fine. We had a weird transition with our oldest because he was barely 2 when they were born. But overall they all got along really well, and we had no clinginess, no crazy behavior with him, and he took to them really, really well.
That's awesome.
Yeah, my breastfeeding, it was I wasn't even planning to do breastfeeding with them. But I decided to try, and my baby B, her name's Kendall, she latched fine. She did pretty well with nursing, but my baby A kind of struggled. So I did pumping mostly exclusively, latching sometimes with baby B, but I was able to make it a whole year pumping without ever having to do formula.
Wow. That's
And
amazing for twins, especially. That's
for
crazy.
twins, yes. I think pumping early on kind of gave me a little bit of an oversupply, which is not encouraged by any means, but with twins, I needed it. So I could feed them both what they needed. There was one time I had to do formulas because I got a kidney stone and I had to take a medication that was not safe. So, but overall they were very healthy and they thrived, and they they're 4 now. So it's crazy how fast it went by.
It does. Crazy. Time flies. Yep.
Alexis, did you do anything to prepare for your twin birth? Like, is there any extra classes or anything extra that you did to prepare?
No, I was expecting nothing out of that one. And I kind of felt bad because I think I could have had a better experience had I done a bit more. I mean, I'd read An Amazing Guide to Childbirth with all my pregnancies actually, and because I love reading the stories in there, and she has really great tips in the second half. But I really didn't do as much as I could have. I didn't expect anything. I just thought if it's a C-section, then it's a C-section. I really wanted to go for a vaginal birth with both. But I knew that had there's always that chance.
Yeah. Yeah. You kind of had like the best case scenario, because that's kind of what they say is like baby A's head down, and then hopefully after baby A's born, then B will flip. And like, so it sounds like you just kind of had the best case scenario there, that worked out really well.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It was a blessing for sure. And I see all these like home births with twins. I'm like, oh, that would have been so cool. I was not in that mindset ever until 2 years ago, but that would have been really cool to have an experience where it was unmedicated, because I would have loved to have a different bond. I feel like the bond with unmedicated is different than when you have medications flowing through you. But overall, it was really, really beautiful. And my husband, when he came to tell me Elsie was fine, it was such a relief because he was so excited about it. And because they were anticipating like NICU, they were like, okay, she's going to need a NICU. It's going to be, we don't know how long they'll be in the NICU because they're 35 weeks, and they were healthy weights. They were, my A was 5'5", and my B was 5'7", so they were pretty good size. My oldest, good for twins. My oldest was like 8'4", so I had pretty big, good sized babies considering the gestation they were born at. But yeah, it was good. I was very happy to be able to give them breast milk for their whole year of life, that's awesome. Whole first year of life.
That's amazing. Did you have any extra support throughout that process to help you with the twins and your 2-year-old?
I had some. My mom was able to help. My husband had 2 weeks off of work, and so he took those 2 weeks. And then after that, my mom came to our house for about a week after. So I was 3 weeks postpartum, and she was helping, and she helped with my oldest a lot. And by that point, I was feeling pretty good. I didn't need tons of help. It was just the transition to
Yeah.
more kids to look after. But overall, my body felt really good. I recovered well from that one.
Good. That's awesome. Well, tell us, okay, about how you said that you didn't really think about unmedicated birth until like 2 years ago, and your youngest is 1. So like, what kind of made that transition for you? What brought that to light, I guess?
Well, actually, I was a bit later. I was thinking because she turned 1 in July, so um it was in the middle of my pregnancy that I kind of thought about it. But I have a good friend who, and from my old where we used to live, she had all her babies at home, and I thought, that's great for you, love it, don't care for it for myself. And then I had another friend who had a home birth, and she surprised me with it. I had no idea she was planning it, and she told me about it, that she was going to do it. And then it kind of piqued my interest a little bit because I'm like, well, more people are actually starting to do this. This is interesting. So I looked into it. But I was midway through my pregnancy when that happened, and a few other things happened prior. But I'll just get into the pregnancy part of it. Let's see, trying to think of how to start it. So I was probably 24 weeks, I think, of pregnant with my 4th when I was contemplating the home birth. I didn't have any bad experiences per se with OBGYN care. But I did have one after I was contemplating switching that I'm like, okay, I'm done. But
Yeah.
he just made some remarks that they're trying to be silly, but it was just very inconsiderate. I feel like he just was like, glad I'm not pregnant right now. I'm like, that's okay, you're a guy for once, but I mean that's not really something that you tell a pregnant woman. That's kind of insensitive. But
Yeah.
I was already kind of on the tipping point. After I heard about home birth from some friends, I decided to pray. I'm religious. Started to pray about it and decide if that's what God wanted me to do, and if that was the right choice. And took a lot of back and forth on it. And I talked to my husband about it, and he was like, "Not happening. It's my baby too. What if something happens? We're not doing it." And he kind of shut me down immediately. And then I kept bringing it up because it was in the back of my mind. And he's like, okay, well, if you can give me some good facts, if you can do some research on it, because he was in school at the time, he didn't have as much time to be able to prepare like I was able to. So I listened to podcasts. I was listening to, I was watching home birth stories, and doing all the research I could find. And I presented it to him, and he was like, if you feel good about this, if you feel like this is what you need to do, then I will support you in it. And so I said, okay. And I went to that last OB appointment, and they handed me the glucose drink at that appointment. And after that remark from the doctor, I just went home, and I'm like, I'm calling the midwife because I had a midwife that my friend referred to me, and so, or referred me to. And I called her the next day, and I'm like, hey, this is what's going on. I was 26. Let's see, I was 25-ish weeks at the time. And we talked, and I interviewed her over the phone. She interviewed me back. It's a two-way relationship at that point. And I felt very, very good about her. She was very hands-off. What I was wanting out of this, as I was researching more, was not going to be done in the hospital. What I was wanting out of this last birth, I couldn't have achieved it in the hospital. So a home birth felt more and more right as I was continuing to look for the peace of mind with it. But I was 26 weeks when I first had my appointment with her. And so she came to my house. It was wonderful. And she got to meet my kids. And I saw her up until I had, let's see, I saw her for about 10 weeks because I had my baby early. I was 36 weeks and 3 days. And I started seeing a little bit of like blood tinge mucus that morning. And so I messaged her and I was like, could this be something starting? My cervix dilating. And I had the Braxton Hicks early on, as always. I had them probably about 8 weeks, like my twins. And I was starting to feel those still, but they weren't changing at that point. And she said, it could be the start of your cervix ripening or dilating. So just try and rest as much as you can. We want to have that baby stay in until 37 weeks minimum. And I'm just thinking that's not going to happen.
Yeah. I'm feeling this. This is coming.
This is something starting to shift. But that night, it was about 11 p.m. I was going to try and go to sleep, and I felt the first contraction, and it was, and then looking back, I can see it now. My whole stomach was tight. I'm like, this, I didn't think about it. I just thought it was just one of those really strong Braxton Hicks contractions. And so I just tried to brush it off and go to sleep. And then 5 minutes later, I got another one. And so I got up and I got on my birthing ball and I started bouncing on my birthing ball. And 2 minutes later, I got another one. So I'm like, these are pretty close together.
Mm-hmm.
So I just tried to just breathe through them. I turned on Christian Hypno Birthing, the app, and just listened to some music, and just try to breathe through them. Like, hey, this is good practice. If this is for normal labor, this is good practice, And it was every 2 minutes from that point, and they were very inconsistent because I was timing them. I was timing about 46 seconds long for about 2 minutes apart, 1.5 to 2 minutes apart. And so I was just kind of try to labor my closet and around the house. I went downstairs after about an hour of that. And then I messaged my midwife at around 12 o'clock and I told her what was going on. And she said, it sounds like it's probably real. I'll head over there because it sounds like they're pretty close together. And let's see, about 10 minutes later, about 15 minutes later, my water broke during a pushing contraction. My husband came downstairs because he could hear me moaning through them, and he's like, is this really happening right now? I'm like, I think it's happening. So I had to squeeze my hips because I felt so much pressure down there. And during the hip squeeze is when my water popped, and it never happened. I never got to experience a natural rupture like that. And so, and I was on my knees against the couch when that happened. So I crawled over to our hard floors in the kitchen area, and I immediately felt, once the water popped, I immediately felt her just drop into my pelvis.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And so, that was about an hour and 15 minutes into the active labor. And so I heard and messaged her between the contractions, my water just broke, and she was going to have, she had a colleague who was in Payson to come out, and because she was in Pleasant Grove, it was a drive. And Pleasant Grove is like probably 30 minutes away. She messaged her colleague, and her colleague had took a melatonin because she was up with two babies the night before, two births the night before. So she took a melatonin and was out because she didn't have any babies due anytime soon.
Yep.
And so she didn't see the message. So about 10 minutes after my water broke, and I was having the fetal ejection reflex at that point. I felt her coming out, and so I was trying to like not push with the fetal ejection reflex because I knew and I had her words in my head, my midwife's words, like, you're gonna want to be pushing with that, and I'm gonna tell you to slow down so you don't tear. And I just
Mhm.
remember yelling out loud, I don't care. I just pushed with it, and I was screaming at this point. All my kids were upstairs sleeping. It was midnight. And I was shocked they didn't wake up because I did not even care. I am like, I don't care if I wake them up. I don't care. I just need to go get this baby out. Because when I felt her head, um, their little skulls are wrinkled together, and I mean, my first thought was, could that be cord? But looking back, no, my water broke way late in the game, so there's no way it could have been cord. But I once I got her head out, I felt her shoulder shift, and I moved back to my just on my knees because I was on my hands and knees. Moved back to my knees, and I grabbed her by the back of the neck, and I just pushed her little body out and just put her up to my chest, and it was just my husband there. I had him go grab our basket of supplies. I had towels and
Mhm.
Chuck's pads and all those things, and so he didn't even realize how far into this we were when
Yeah.
he came back, and he's
He's
all
like,
of a sudden I
whoa, there's
just
a
saw
baby.
like, oh, there's a baby here. But oh, it was the best experience. And he's like, it didn't sound like it. I'm like, hey, but that was me mid birth. I mean, it's not gonna sound like it, but it really, really was. It's incredible. And she took a big deep breath right away, and she latched right away, and it was honestly just the most life-changing event because I had wanted an unmedicated birth from the start. And I think I look back and I think God was preparing me for this birth because he knew how fast it was going to be. He knew if I wasn't planning a home birth with the supplies on hand, with the knowledge on hand, with everything that I needed just at home, then I could have had her in the car. I could have had a very
Mhm.
traumatic experience with EMTs coming to my house and all my neighbors freaking out. But but it truly was exactly what I needed. And I got to, I mean, my husband called my midwife because she was on her way, and she kind of like told me, what to expect. She asked how baby was doing, asked how I was doing. She was in awe because this was the first birth that she missed, and she was a very seasoned midwife.
Oh, wow.
But um but she kind of helped me kind of know how to deliver the placenta so that it detached well and came out properly and everything without anything sticking. And it was perfect. I mean, I got to see the placenta, I got to observe it and hold it, and I was surprised by how heavy it was. And like, it wasn't as big, it was, it's a smaller one, um but I got to let the cord turn white before cutting, and it stayed attached for 2 hours. And my husband helped me get to our couch to lay down, and by that point I know she had latched and she was nursing, and my midwife came in, and she was just in awe. But she looked me over, she helped me. I had a few little lacerations that she stitched up, but I was able to do it with no cervical exams, with no one touching me, with no one looking at me. With my twin birth, I felt like I was on a stage giving birth because there was so many people in the room and all these bright lights, and this was just a very dark, quiet, oxytocin filled setting. And she was able to latch right away. I felt like that I didn't get that with any of my other ones. And I remember she just looked around. She was just in awe of what she was seeing too, because it was a new experience for her. But I I was very grateful for that experience, and I think about it every single day. And my kids got to wake up the next morning and see a new baby in our bed with us.
Oh.
They were just confused, like, oh, there's a baby here. Like, where did this come from? But yeah, it was beautiful.
How amazing. That's incredible. What's like going through your head during that time? Like, were you having any thoughts where you're like, I just am like in it, like we're doing it?
Yeah, I mean, and that's kind of what I was thinking, because I didn't realize it was really happening until my water broke, and that was 10 minutes before she was born. So in my mind, it was. I mean, I was thinking it was prodromal labor, and I'm like, I can get through this. And then I look back and I can kind of see when transition hit, and then I was like, I can't, like, if this is what real labor is going to be, I gotta go to the hospital and get the epidural. And I was very surprised by how clear my mind was during the actual birth process. It sharp. I felt very in tune with my body, and I felt in very much control. And that was something very different from my other ones. I felt like I had to give all the control to other people because I had the epidural, I had Pitocin, and I couldn't move as much as I would have liked to. I didn't have access to food and water. I had monitors on, I had an IV in, so I just felt very out of control because it was just all too much for me to be able to like think clearly. But it was like 10 minutes of like thinking, I realized I'm actually having a baby. But yeah, my mind was very clear, and I was very surprised by that.
Yeah, that's amazing.
That's awesome. That's a really great story.
It is.
Thank you. It's very I had prayed for like a faster labor, like I'll take like a 6-hour labor, and then I'm like, well, maybe 4 hours would be fine. And then he's like, here's an hour and 25
An hour and a
minutes.
half.
I'm like, wonderful. My body was exhausted after that. I
I'm
didn't think it could
sure.
be so exhausted, but it was like a freight train went through me because of how fast it was. And my back and my hips hurt for like a week afterwards.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep. That's awesome. Did you what are your thoughts? Well, I guess you kind of mentioned it, you felt more in control, like the difference between like, you know, the medical model of care versus like the care you received from a midwife, like like what were your thoughts and feelings about that?
It was much more personable with my midwife. She would come to me. She has an office, and she also has so I went to her office sometimes in between our homes. And I also went to her home because she had a very old tech ultrasound machine just to make sure, because she's like, I think baby's head down, but I'm not 100% sure. So
Just wanted to double check.
Yeah, just double check just to know what to prepare for, because she was supportive of breech birth. She had no problem with it. And I asked her all the questions like, how are you with breech birth? What do you do with hemorrhage? What do you do with this and that? And she had an answer that I was satisfied with each time. And so like I wasn't like thrilled with the idea of a breech birth, because I think she was breech at like 30 weeks, but then she flipped, and she stayed flipped the rest of the pregnancy after that.
Yeah.
But so yeah, she would come to me, and so it just felt, and she got to know my kids. Like she loved my kids, and she got to see them the next morning when she came to check in on us to see how things were going. And she was more knowledgeable on breastfeeding and on tongue and lip ties. And she did like some of the newborn screening. She submitted all the papers for a birth certificate. So I didn't feel like I needed a whole team of people. I mean, some people prefer that, and that's okay. And some people prefer having like a doula and a midwife and the midwife assistant or things like that. And I was comfortable with just having her because she could do everything for me. And it was a really good relationship back and forth because I felt comfortable with her and she was comfortable with me. Whereas with an OB, you just sign up and they see you. I mean, the office I went to, they had rotating OBs. And so you saw a new one each time. You didn't really get to have the one that you felt most comfortable with.
Right.
But she was a traditional midwife. So she doesn't carry medication on her. She has tinctures and things like that, but she's not licensed by the state, so she doesn't carry any of those things. And she was able to give me the care that I wanted and needed. I wanted a good postpartum experience. That was very important to me, to be able to just have my baby with me and not have to have them swept away for all these different exams. And she picked up on the lip tie immediately. So she did the little newborn just check up to see how things she was doing. About 2 hours after she was born. And she's like, oh yeah, there's a pretty strong lip tie here. If you have breastfeeding troubles, this is who you should see, and they can help kind of adjust. I mean, I probably could have taken her to even a chiropractor and had them like kind of do a bit of body work, because it was probably hard for her too. It was
Yeah.
very, 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 very fast, and she was kind of just forced out really quickly.
Yep.
And so but she didn't seem to have a lot of tension overall with her body, just that lip tie. And that was the hardest part with breastfeeding, was the lip tie. And once, I think she was a month old when I got that revised by a pediatric dentist. And ever since then, it's been a flawless breastfeeding experience. She's thrived, and she's 14 months, and I hope that we can make it to at least 3 years old before she self-weans, because it's just been the best bonding. Because I haven't done this with my other ones either. I never got to breastfeed,
Yeah.
and it's been a game changer for sure.
Wow.
That's amazing.
That's awesome.
I loved hearing about all of your births. So incredible.
Yeah.
They're all fun. They're all
so different. They're all, I mean, but that's every birth. Every birth is so different. But like going from, one baby to 2 babies and home birth, you've had a very wide range of different things to kind of expect and prepare for. So
yeah,
just really incredible. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah.
Of course. Thank you guys. Those were all such fun experiences, but I especially am grateful for the home birth. And if we were to have any more children, I would absolutely do a home birth again. I could never have another hospital birth.
Yeah. That tends to be what most people say. It's like, once you do it, they're like, you can't go back. Yep. It's like, unless it's like absolutely necessary, most people are like, nope.
Yeah, like I will do everything I can to prepare for a home birth from before even getting pregnant. I mean, we're done, but I try to keep my nutrition good regardless. But I would start from the very start and make sure that everything was good and healthy. I was able to decline things I didn't want during my home birth experience. I didn't end up doing the gestational diabetes test. I didn't have it with my others, even with my twin pregnancy. And so I didn't really feel like it was necessary. I just make sure I had a low sugar, low carb, and high protein and diet. So, and it worked out beautifully. But that's one thing that people don't think about, is you can decline some of those tests that you don't,
or that there's other options.
There's other options. Yeah, you don't have to take the 50 milligram sugar glucose drink. You can take other things like the fresh test or something like that. But.
Right. Yep. Awesome. Well, thanks so much. This was so fun. I love hearing these stories, and
me too.
especially like the growth and the change. And I love that. So, all right. Well, to all of our listeners, I think this was one of our last birth stories. We've been doing birth stories all through the summer, and I think you might be our last one. So it was a really fun, definitely. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity. I love sharing.
Yeah. Thanks for coming. And everybody, be sure that you subscribe and stay